started here. I'd like to call to order the Learning and Teaching Committee meeting for, Community Unit School District 303 for Monday, October 19th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. First thing up is citizens' comments, and we have a few. Parker will read the preamble.
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Okay, the first speaker is Danielle Penman on COVID case data.
Hi, I'm Danielle Penman, a parent to a senior and a elementary school student. And I just wanted to come and talk to you guys tonight about your COVID data that you guys have on your dashboard. I did submit a FOIA in the beginning of October to get the total number of confirmed COVID cases that we have in the district for students and for staff members. I was very specific that I wanted confirmed cases of students and staff members in our school buildings. And I got a response back that it was a dashboard that I could look at on the website. So I did, and it said that there was 39 cases. However, at the same time that I FOIA'd D303, I also FOIA'd the Kane County Public Health Department. And their FOIA is significantly different response than what our district is displaying on our webpage. They have reported from our district confirmed cases of students and faculty in our buildings as 13 from August 19th through October 1st. The same time period I requested from D303, August 19th through October 1st. So I don't know where the discrepancy is, or maybe that the people that are generating these reports are not healthcare related people that don't understand the data, but for confirmed cases, that is cases that the patients that are tested get positive. That's not, they're testing and waiting for cases. So when you're putting information out to the public about confirmed cases, I think you need to be very careful that you're putting out accurate data. And I would ask that the district please put a column on their dashboard, the confirmed cases that are reported to the Kane County Health Department, because those then have to go on to the Illinois Public Health Department. We have to do that for contact tracing. So I think that would be helpful. I think especially when we're going back to school in the high schools, I know that a letter already came out that there's a confirmed, or there's an active case. That is a little bit of fear mongering and misinformation to the public that there's all these cases going on, but we have a discrepancy here. And I don't know if it was an error. I don't know if it was meant to be deceptive, but I want you to know that there's a big discrepancy here. There's a double the cases that were actually reported to our health department. So please clarify that and address that. Whoever's reporting to the public health department, who then reports to the IDPH department. Also, I think it would be helpful that we lose some of the commentary from some of the board members when they talk about the possibility of like us going to remote, are we gonna be able to get kids in buildings? Are we gonna be able to keep the kids in buildings? We're moving forward very well. Our safeguards are working, and it's very upsetting to parents that are trying to have a routine with their kids, and for high school parents that want their kids to be in school right now. And we're very excited, the kids are excited to start school, to be worried that the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath them every day. What are your criteria? What are your metrics that our district has in place so that it's not going to be a surprise email that goes out at the end of the day that tomorrow school's canceled? It needs to be very clear to the public. What are our metrics? Because it's not right now. And if board members and administrators have some sign of inside information and the comments are coming from that, the public has a right to know because they need to plan and we need to know. And there are some cases in different counties in Illinois that are going up, but that doesn't mean that because they're going up that our district is going to close if other counties and districts close. We're an individual district. So I just ask moving forward that we're very careful and sensitive about the information that we're putting out there, that's accurate and thorough for the public, because there are concerned family members and parents and staff members that have a right to know, honest, truthful data and information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mark Huber on next steps.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Mark Huber. I have 2 stepdaughters in the district. Okay, better? Okay. Good evening. My name is Mark Huber. I have 2 stepdaughters in the district, one at Redling and one at North. Having made it past the 19th target date today, I just wanted to take a second and acknowledge the significance of this initial progress and commend the board, the administration, and the teachers for accomplishing something that many of our neighboring school districts have failed at. In my comments to the board on September 14th, I encouraged you to lead the way in reopening, to show the kids that we as a community are not afraid to be trailblazers and that leaders value action over inaction. We appear to be on our way, but cannot afford to stop planning for the next stage. I know this is not an easy process, and that each step brings with it more complexities than the previous one. As we look forward, we must not fall victim to the analysis paralysis we've seen stop other districts like 214 and 203. We cannot afford to rest on our laurels and lose the momentum that we have gotten. As it stands today, many kids are still suffering and are faced with the prospect of missing the key milestones that only a year ago were taken for granted as part of the high school experience. Making new friends in the classroom, exploring new activities through clubs, and playing their favorite sport in front of their families have been taken away from them. Homecoming, prom, and even graduation are no longer certainties. We cannot fail our children by allowing them to go through high school without these critical learning experiences. I'd like to challenge all of us to set a goal of implementing the original full hybrid plan by January 5th, the beginning of the next quarter. We must all work together to make this a reality. Adversarial relationships and political posturing serve the personal agendas of the adults at the expense of the children whose interests we are supposed to put first. The kids don't have time for this. They only get 4 years in high school, and each year is critical in the development process and cannot be redone. We need to stop stealing the kids' memories and robbing them of the experience they need to compete in the world that we're sending them out into. The students are watching and the students are listening, and believe me, the students are learning during this challenging time. It's up to all of us, the parents, the board, the teachers, and the union, to decide what we want to teach them. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we have Joe Blomquist, and the topic is finding a balance.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Joe Blomquist, SCEA President. I wanted to come to you today partially based off of the conversation last week and in preparation for tonight's conversation because I think it's really important to say our students are more than a test score. If you talk to our teachers and administrators, there's a lot that goes into educating our children. I think you can ask parents that as well. I want you to keep that in mind as you go through this data, because the data doesn't tell the full story. In a given day, working with these students, not only is it about pushing the rigor and improving their educational and academic aptitude, it's also about helping them make their way through everyday life, to be firm in their executive functioning skills, to be more self-actualized and have higher self-esteem, to problem solve with their peers and with adults in a changing world. And that takes time in itself. And if you talk to our teachers and administrators, we have to find that balance. When we push our students, there's only so far that we can go that we could push them too far. And it's really important for their social-emotional well-being, for their well-being as human beings, not just thinking academically, to make sure that you take that into account. I encourage you to talk to teachers around the district, to talk to the administrators, and you will learn so much more about what's going on in the classroom, not just the standards that we are meeting, but the students that we are helping understand how not only are they becoming academically, but they are belonging in their school setting and in their community. So please keep that in mind as we continue to look at this data and realize at every moment that we take a look at data, which is just, I don't want to detract from taking a look at data, but every moment that we take a look at data is taking away from time that we can take that time to connect with these students and help them become better people in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, and that, that concludes the citizen comments. Next up is superintendent update, and for that, because Dr. Person.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. I just wanted to mention tonight, again, the information about our meal pickup program for our students and family members in the community. The Department of Agriculture did extend the summer food service program through June 30th of 2021, which means that we're able to access a greater number of meals for families in our community. Students or children ages 1 through 18 are eligible for meals, so even if you have a child in your household that is not school age, you're able to pick up a meal. And we are doing a pickup on Monday that's actually for the whole week. So you can pick up all 7 meals in one pickup on Mondays, and the schedule is on the district website. Anyone in our community qualifies for these meals. It's not under the traditional free and reduced lunch meal guidelines. So we would encourage you, if that's something that you need to take advantage of or would be interested in picking up a meal, we would really encourage you to do so. We would like to be able to provide that for you. All of these meals are free of charge and are paid for through the federal grant program. The full schedule is on the district website, so if you want to know when your school or the school closest to you has pickup times available, you'll want to check there. The times differ by elementary, middle, and high school. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. Okay, then next up we have our discussion items. The first item for discussion is the Seal of Biliteracy update.
Where am I going? Sorry? Okay. Okay, good evening. So my name is Cindy Roosh. I'm the Director of Staff, Family, and Student Services. Here tonight to give you an update on the Seal of Biliteracy. We did talk to you back in February, if you recall, and we had talked about some things that we had in the works. And so we wanted to come back and give you an update on how students had done on their testing in the spring so that you could see those results. So again, with our strategic commitment, we're looking to provide learning experiences that give students opportunities beyond our district and looking forward to their careers in higher education. And we want to make sure that we're preparing them for life after D303. And one of the ways that we can do that is by offering the Seal of Biliteracy. Again, this aligns to policy 6:40, or curriculum development. As a reminder to you, the Seal of Biliteracy is awarded to students upon graduation, and they must demonstrate both a high level of proficiency in English and also a high level of proficiency in another language, a world language. Students can either earn the Seal or the commendation, depending on the level of their scores. And so when we presented to you in February, we had all those numbers up to 2018, 2019, and now we're very pleased to be able to share how the students did this past spring for the 2019-2020 school year. And you can see that we are continually adding to the numbers of students who are earning both the Seal and the commendation. In particular, I would say this spring, obviously was an unprecedented spring for us in terms of testing, and all of the students had to take the tests remotely. So I especially want to thank Mark Orzula from East High School and Renee Reynolds at North High School, because they did a tremendous job of supporting the students in this new testing environment. So they had to go through a remote proctoring system, 2 different platforms depending on the test the students were taking, working with families and students to troubleshoot the technology and to get them to be successful. So I give them kudos both to the students for their perseverance and for their ability to adapt to the situation, but also to the staff members, because I want to say that they did a tremendous job of working together as a team with both the students, myself, and the families, so that we could see the student success that we see. And just as a reminder, one of the benefits of why is this important for us to celebrate the accomplishments of our students, it's really because it can get them things when they get to college. So colleges and universities are looking to see that students are earning this. They can earn coursework or credit at the college level. And also it bodes well for jobs. Employers are looking for that well. So it gives them a credential and a certification that's recognized beyond just what they have here in D303. And thinking about that, I did want to share just a few things, because the pathway to earning the seal of biliteracy doesn't start just at the high school. It starts before then. So when we think about it, there are a lot of things that we're doing in the district to start the kids early on. And so this includes not only offering those world language classes before they start at high school, like at the middle school, but it also means developing the skills of our bilingual or our English language learners at an early age. So some of the things that we're implementing is that we newly adopted our resource to support our K-5 bilingual classrooms that's being implemented this school year, the benchmark literacy program that you approved. And so that offers them resources in both English and Spanish. We have also, through the work that we've done in terms of providing additional digital supports, adopted Nearpod, which is a digital resource that has ESL lessons and resources that teachers can use to support that, students who need that. We have also adopted iReady, which is like the Spanish equivalent of iStation for students. So it's a Spanish literacy program that works the same way as iReady. It assesses them and then gives them a personalized pathway of activities that they can work on in Spanish. And our students in our bilingual program are accessing that. As well as the RES Kids that you've also approved for use for supporting our students in this digital environment. It is available both in English and Spanish, and so students have access to books in both languages. And so I just wanted to give you an update on just some of those things that we're doing at the earlier levels to get kids to be successful in their native or home language if they have it, but also then to provide access and support for them to develop their English skills. Thank you. For questions?
Does anyone have any questions, comments?
I think this is fabulous. I hope it keeps growing as it's growing. I did wonder, and I think you might have answered it with all the early resources that we're giving, why the significant growth over the last 4 or 5 years. And is it what we are doing, or are kids more, do they know about the certification?
I think it's a combination of things. So I think it's more people knowing about it and really recognizing. So when the seal first came out, the state legislation for giving college credit wasn't in place. So there wasn't as much of as an incentive. Once that came in a little bit later, that certainly incentivized the program. Previously, when we gave the assessments, it was outside of school. It was on a Saturday, and we moved to giving it to in-person in school. And so that created greater access to our students. So we had more students who were able to take that test as well. I think our world language teachers have done a tremendous job of publicizing and discussing the value of it in their classrooms and helping students understand and prepare for it. And I think also we've done, again, some partnerships. I mentioned when we were here in February, specifically working with some of the ethnic language schools that are near to us and providing partnerships so that we can get opportunities for students and less commonly tested languages to be able to earn the seal of biliteracy as well.
Anyone else? I do have a question, and I maybe should know the answer to this, but how many languages do we have kids earning the seal in?
Earning the seal,
I know that it was in there somewhere. I
Yeah.
believe it was. I just don't read.
so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7? And
Seven.
the reason I'm asking is that the number of languages increased over the years. In other words, I think we kind of started out and it was a couple of languages. and I think
Right.
we're kind of broadening that.
We've broadened that, and that largely started out again with the availability of the assessments too. What ISB had approved when they first rolled it out, there were not as many assessments that were available to students. For instance, the Polish one was not one that was readily available, and there was a lot of work done actually by the consulate in the city of Chicago to help students to access that. And then the test companies have developed a more readily accessible test. The only one they could take before was one from the European Commonwealth, so you can sign up for that one. But this one was, again, they've added it to Apple, so students could, or I'm sorry, to Stamp for S, so students could sign up and take that more easily. So the tests are becoming more available to students. You will see, I predict in the coming years, more variety in the languages, just based on some of the partnerships and the tests that I know students have been taking. They just haven't graduated yet.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have any? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And next up is the Transition Center update.
Okay, well, thank you for having me back. I'm here today just to share an update with you about the progress that we've made with our transition program, which is now located over at the Haynes Center. Our students have prepared a number of different videos for you to give you a little bit of a virtual tour and experience if you would visit the Daily Bean, our cafe, and then some student testimonials at the end. Oh. Okay, so just as a reminder, our transition program services special education students between the ages of 18 and 22 years of age. We are servicing full remote, hybrid, and in-person students, and our focus is on employment, including work-based learning, education and training, and activities of daily living. So to start us off, here's our staff, and our students are going to help take a tour.
My name is Annie Irwin, and this is the kitchen where we cook our lunch every day.
The day room with these special skills.
My name is Justin Anderson, and this is where we do the full lab.
Hello, my name is Blake Michael, and this is a special ed room. This is where the teachers hang out all the time.
Oh, hi, I'm Nurse Julie, welcome.
All right, so at your tables, we've given you just a little sample. So Justin introduced you to our vocational lab. During that process, our students actually take recycled paper and they shred it, and we go through a measuring and blending process, pressing the paper back, letting it dry, and then we cut it to make gift tags So the students wanted you all to have a sample, so there they are for you for your, little gift giving ventures this upcoming holiday season. Our next video is we are still so fortunate to be able to run the Daily Bean, which is our fully functioning cafe. Because the library is also at Haynes, it makes it really easy for us to be able to continue to provide coffee, tea, and hot chocolate. So we'll hope that you'll come and join us at some point. If you do, here's what your experience will be like.
Hello, welcome to the Daily Bean. I'm Matthew.
I'm Matthew. I think I'm gonna have a 12-ounce breakfast blend with 2 creams, and then a 16-ounce. What's the flavor of the day?
From the day is French vanilla.
Oh, perfect. That would be great. So a 16-ounce French vanilla. And a 12-ounce breakfast blend.
And that is now $4.50.
All right, awesome. Here you go. You're welcome. Thank you, Matthew. Just 2 regulars would be great for this one. Okay, thank you so much. Awesome.
No creamers.
Actually, I'm gonna do 1 French vanilla cream first. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. It was great to see you today. All right.
Matthew did such a good job. And our last 2 videos are 2 student testimonials. Some of you may remember Jordan, who has been to a board meeting to speak with us before. So she's going to share a message for you. She is a full remote learner this year, and she'll tell you a little bit about that. And then Kevin Garcia is one of our students who accesses support on the farther end of the continuum. So he's got a short little message for you as well.
Hi, my name is Jordan Siegel, and I'm in my 4th and final year of my transition program. What I enjoy about being in transition this year is the fact that I get to work from home. I don't need to worry about getting up and getting ready, and also putting on a mask and heading to the transition program acting all anxious. I can work at the comfort of my own home, so I don't need to worry about stress. And here's some of my favorite things about the transition program. My favorite things about the transition program are having having explicit instruction every day with Allison because it's fun. We even get to talk about emailing. And I also work on activities of daily living to keep my home clean and keep my mom happy. I also have social work and speech with Annalise. I also have health and wellness with Annie, where we talk about communication skills and how to calm our minds and bodies. On Wednesdays, I have a Fierce Array with Claire, where we do club wellness and entertainment, and Aim Sale with Emily, where we talk about jobs. I just want to say a huge thank you to the board for bringing us the Haynes Transition Center. Without it, we would have been stuck at the high school. So again, I want to say thank you all.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I teach transitions so I can get more training on vocational. I do that at the L&T, which we are here at, which used to be Haynes Middle School, which is now a place for us to use. And thank you. This is a deal for me.
Okay, so just on behalf of our staff over at the transition program, I do want to offer Mr. Barrett and his team huge kudos and thanks for seeing the renovation through, kind of those day-to-day ins and outs. I know Dr. Chapman also helped out during those times too. So without them and their support of their teams, we wouldn't have a beautiful space to call home. And then just to the administration and to the board for supporting this project. Our kids are benefiting from it every single day. And we truly appreciate you all and the work that you do on behalf of our students. Any questions?
I do. So how have you found that the team is working through adjusting to remote students and hybrid and in-person? It sounds like from Jordan, she definitely has a very full schedule. And is that the same across the board, or what kind of, can you walk us through the things you've done to like make that transition seamless?
Yeah, sure. So we have a majority of our students are in-person learners. So still following kind of that schedule of whether they're a 5-day-a-week student or a 2-day-a-week student. So our continuum offers that based on the individual student's level of need. So most of our kids are in person. We have a handful of students that are a full remote. And then we also have a handful of students that kind of meet somewhere in the middle. So maybe they're doing some remote learning in that kind of hybrid type model, or in some in-person learning. We're able to provide related services in person. So we worked with the families and just kind of create based on what the students' needs are, when would be the best times for them to be at the center, accessing those supports. And then when could things be either accomplished through concurrent teaching or through synchronous activities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just actually want to say that I'm very pleased to see them moved in and happy, and that the students accessing the transition program have a proper place to do so and enough space to do it in.
Thank you.
I was going to ask you if you felt that they liked the space, but I think Jordan responded exactly the way we had wondered, I had wondered. So thank you for all the work you all have put in, and please tell the students we're glad that they have their space.
I will definitely pass that along. And we hope that you'll be able to come and visit in person sometime soon.
I apologize to the board for being late. I had a conflicting appointment. I just want to say I was able to watch the video on my own. And it was just wonderful to see the students utilize the space. What especially was good to see that they had an area for them to have their personal space when they need it for changing and such things, and for the nurse to be there. So I know that was something they haven't had really since the inception of the program. So I was very happy to see that this was an area that we were able to provide for them. So very glad to see it, and thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Um,
Anything else?
Okay. I heard somebody. So my first question I have is what again are the hours of the daily meeting we need to advertise? So,
We are open from approximately 9 to 1. The students do work, typically we would have 2 students and a job coach. In the dean, because of the restrictions, we've narrowed it to 1 student. So we're trying to provide, because it's really our only vocational, genuinely, a genuine vocational experience for our kids right now, given the circumstances. So we've broken it down into 60-minute kind of shifts. So there is throughout the day a period of transition when 1 student would be transitioning out and coming back. But they graciously put a sign and say, we'll be right back. So if you come to the library, just step through the main entrance of the library. The cafe is right to the right before you would step through the protocols to go into the library.
and the other question is kind of more open-ended, but as far as kind of pretty much as soon as you got there, we had all kinds of other restrictions. And essentially, how do you envision things occurring once hopefully all this stuff is lifted, as far as utilization of the space?
That's a great question. So I think the largest thing, the largest experience that we're missing out, and we talk as a staff all the time, it's challenging to run a community-based transition program with minimal access in the community. So I think we've done a good job in trying to provide as many authentic experiences as we can, given the circumstances, but certainly increasing that access when able will be our #1 goal. Going back to providing more off-campus work experiences for students with job coaching support. As we've talked about in the past, we have over 30 partnerships with local businesses, Ace Hardware, Culver's, to name a few, where we would really like to get kids back to having that work training experience with support in a safe environment. So that would be the largest change to the current schedule, but still trying to, working to provide all of those other learning opportunities that we're currently providing for students.
Does anybody else have any? Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm glad they're utilizing the space and enjoying, looks like they're enjoying the space. So. All right, next up is the high school course offerings.
You're going to listen to a screencastify of Dr. Warren presenting the high school course offerings, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Good evening. I am Christine Warren, Director of Curriculum, here to share with you the high school course title and description revisions and high school art curriculum maps. Our district fine arts CDTs work together to develop a fine arts conceptual framework. It reads, as part of a complete education, students in District 303 develop a lifelong relationship to visual and performing arts through creating, performing, responding, and connecting. These 4 artistic processes stated in our conceptual framework are the cognitive and physical actions where learning and making are realized in all areas within fine arts. Visual arts at the high school level has continued to update their course offerings since the adoption of the new fine arts standards. Tonight, we are bringing level 3 and advanced curriculum maps for 3D media, digital art, illustration and design, and film, animation, and new media. Copies of the curriculum maps are available in the board packet. On the screen in front of you, you'll see the proposed course title changes. There are 6 in art, 1 in wellness, and CTE with 1 course description revision. The first 2 levels of the art classes listed on your screen have already been approved by the board. In order to keep these courses aligned, we would like to change the titles of our level 3 and advanced courses to mirror levels 1 and 2. We believe the course title and description changes are more reflective of the standards being taught. For athletic training, the title Sports Medicine and course description provides a broader scope for those students interested in pursuing a career in a health-related field. This course will now be able to serve as an additional pathway for students to enter advanced healthcare concepts. Lastly, with the addition of our Accounting 100 dual credit course this year, College Accounting needed a revised course description and updated prerequisites. All of these proposed revisions can also be found in the board packet. We're asking that these items be included for consent at the November 9th school board meeting. If approved, all changes will be reflected in the high school course offering book made available to students and their families. Thank you for your time this evening.
Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was shorter than some we've seen in the past. Okay, and the update, next up is update on high school gap goal.
Fighting over seats.
Good evening. We are pleased to be here this evening to present to you our summary of learning gaps by courses in grades 9 through 12 at the high school. My name is Jim Richter. I'm principal of St. Charles East High School.
And I'm Audrey Christensen, principal at St. Charles North.
And so the work we're going to be talking about today is really wrapped around the board goal that states by November 2020, you're going to rectify identified mathematics, science, world languages, and CTE prerequisite skill deficits for grades 9 through 12. We are here today to report out on our progress on this goal and the work we've done to complete action step 1, which is to present the performance gaps and prerequisite skill deficits with a plan for rectification to the school board at this October learning and teaching meeting. We intend to also talk a little bit about why we are doing this work, as well as how we did this work and what our product was, what we learned from it, as well as our next steps. So in terms of the why, simply pointing out the skill gaps without a plan to address them does not solve the problem that we were presented with having the result of the spring learning situation we had in COVID-19. And since last spring, our teaching staff have been cognizant of, as well as planning to address skill gaps that existed from their students' experience, again, from last spring. Over on the right is a graphic of the PLC process, and this work is actually part of the normal PLC process that is represented by this diagram that lists the 4 questions that a PLC would typically go through. So as a PLC convenes, what they will first do is identify the intended learning skills and essential learnings that their students need to attain. In this case, our teachers recognized that there were some skill gaps that students were coming in to this fall with, and they were intentionally wrapping their goals around some of those skill gaps. The second question is to develop formative assessments to gauge the degree of student proficiency, and then finally use differentiation to provide students instruction at their own readiness level as reflected in questions 3 and question 4. So the way that we did this work is we spent the afternoon on the September 4th School Improvement Day to have Cross River PLCs identify the skills that were not taught or mastered in each course. And the example I'm going to use here is English 9. So our English 9 team met at the beginning of that afternoon to identify the skills that were not either taught or mastered at the end of the student's freshman year. And then from there, the subsequent course, in this case English 10, identified where those skill gaps would be rectified and the ways that they can intervene within the current curriculum for English 10. We also tied all of those skills to our D203 learning standards, and throughout the course of September to October, teachers were assessing and instructing those skills throughout their units, and that work continues in an ongoing basis. On our most recent School Improvement Day on October 6th, in the afternoon, we identified the assessment timeline for each skill, to identify when we would be assessing whether the students have reached proficiency or not, as well as gather data on the degree to which those skills were already mastered or reached proficiency. And we define proficiency as a student earning a C or better on an assessment that would be tied to that skill. From there, we design future learning experiences and remediation plans in order for students who had not quite received or reached mastery or proficiency on those skills. We'd also like to take you through an example or some examples of what the product looked like for each of the areas that were identified in the board goal. And although we're going to be talking through some examples here tonight, we did have every curricular area go through and identify the prerequisite skills that were inherent in their courses to make sure that students were finding opportunities to address the skill gaps so they can be successful in those subsequent courses. So what you see here is a template that has some headings across the top. Each PLC filled out a table that included the headings listed across the top, and they provided answers to support the questions that were within that chart. The first example that we have is a skill gap roadmap from Geometry Honors. It lists the standard, and so the team went through and identified the ways in which, or how and when that skill would be incorporated into the current course. So the skills that were not quite achieved by students were actually skills that came from algebra from the year before, Algebra 1. They also talked about whether that skill was assessed or not, and if so, when was it assessed? If it was not assessed, when would it be assessed? In this case, this is an example of a skill that was already assessed, and whether that skill was assessed formatively or summatively. And in this case, for this PLC, they assessed it both formatively and summatively. And the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency, which we again identified as earning a C or better, was 93%. For students who hadn't quite mastered those skills, we also wanted our PLCs to identify which tier support opportunities would be available to students to help them work towards mastery of those skills. And so each of the PLCs listed the opportunities that existed for their area. Here's another example of a skill gap roadmap for Spanish 3. Again, the skills that they were addressing were skills that were not quite fully taught or fully mastered in Spanish 2. And so what you can see here is an example of what that skill was, when it would be assessed. And this is one of those skills that are going to be assessed currently in the Spanish 3 curriculum. They are working on that right now and into late November as part of their presentational writing language control. So they don't have proficiency data at this time, but they do know that through their use of formative assessments, they do have opportunities to intervene with students as they matriculate through that curriculum. And the last example I'll talk about is the skill gap roadmap for chemistry. The skill that was missing at the end of freshman biology was using interpreting diagrams and models, as well as using mathematics and computational thinking. What science reported is that the NGSS science and engineering practices are very well integrated into their curriculum, and therefore there is a lot of opportunities for students to engage in those skills throughout subsequent courses. So that's why you'll see in this case, there's a lot of opportunities for students to get practice at those skills within the first unit or first semester of chemistry, units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This skill was formatively assessed, and 80% of our students reached mastery or demonstrated proficiency on this skill.
So this next map has to do with Autos 2. In Autos 2, a pre-test is being administered for each introductory unit related to the standard of identifying and inspecting wheels and tires. This is a NATEF standard that they're following. The teachers are using the data regarding student competency with the standard to inform and adjust the instruction and learning activities. Throughout the units and course, teachers are providing hands-on practice to observe students' learning, provide feedback, and assess proficiency. At the end of the semester, the standard will be formally assessed through a performance assessment, as has been the case in previous years. This ELA standard was identified as a gap by last year's English 10 honors teachers. The English 11 honors and AP English language teachers reviewed the skills associated with this standard with their students during the first quarter, as is outlined in the curriculum. Through formative assessments, it was identified that 100% of students in AP English language demonstrated proficiency with the standard, and 80% of students in English 11 honors demonstrated proficiency with the standard. As part of their ongoing gap analysis plan, English 11 honors teachers will continue to build their students' proficiency with the standard through reteaching, extra practice opportunities in class, and tiered or leveled assignments based upon the students' proficiency levels. Current teachers are embedding specific instruction for the standards identified as gaps by the prerequisite teachers. These gap standards are being addressed throughout the curriculum where they serve as building blocks to the traditional standard in this year's classes. And in analyzing and reviewing all of the maps from all of the teachers for all of the courses at both high schools, we identified that in situations in which a standard was a first quarter building block, students demonstrated 80% to 100% proficiency on the standard. This was a result of the reviewing, reteaching, practice, and feedback the PLC members implemented from their gap analysis plans. For the identified standards which serve as building blocks in upcoming units, PLCs have developed plans, including pre-tests, to guide the instruction to areas of the standard that need to be further developed, practice opportunities, and assessments to measure student proficiency levels. Finally, for circumstances in which students need more time and practice to obtain proficiency, PLCs have identified resources such as ALEX, Congamos, and Smart Music, as well as structures such as the intentional use of office hours and instructional strategies to continue to build students' proficiency with the standard. And finally, as we look at our ongoing work, each PLC in the high schools has developed and will continue to implement action plans designed to build student proficiency with the standards identified as potential gaps. On a large scale, we, all administrators and teachers, will continue to analyze student data, including SAT, PSAT, suite of assessment data, common summative assessment data, and formative assessment data. We will use this information to gauge our students' proficiency with these identified gap standards, as well as those associated with college and career readiness. On a smaller team scale, our school-based team, data teams, and our student services departments will continue to meet weekly to monitor students' academic progress, engagement, and social emotional needs as they provide individual and small group supports to students. We thank you for providing us with the opportunity to share with you the work our high school teachers have and continue to do to meet the needs of our students in these unique times. At this time, we wonder what questions you have for us.
Okay. Looks like Mr. Bryan is ready to go.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. From what I'm taking from these examples you give, it seems like there are not large gaps that we thought there might be in a lot. Again, these are a lot of the examples. So I guess my question is, and obviously there are students that we need to reach out to and close that gap that on anything that they might have missed or they need help with. The way that the schedule is set up now, those office hours that are in place, I feel are extremely important to have those students that really need the help. They need to be able to access those office hours and utilize them. Do we have a plan in place or what's being done to make sure that the students that really need that extra assistance are taking advantage of those office hours?
So some of the work that we have been talking about is shifting from an open office hours concept to more of a deliberate. Here's my second period office hour, here's my fifth period office hour. And really, rather than asking teachers to let their students know they can drop by any time, I think it's better if you get that personal invitation to have your teacher say, if you're really great at tomorrow, you can drop by my office hours at 1 p.m. so we can work on X, Y, and Z skill. So I think that our conversations with our students in our classrooms are going to have to shift more towards that. I think when you have opportunities for unstructured office hours, you do get students who take advantage of it. But sometimes there are students who are going to thrive under some structure. And I think those personal invitations are also going to send a message that the teacher has a great deal of care for them and their learning. And I think that that's going to also benefit the students academically as well as social emotionally.
And I think going along with that tutorial type of approach of an invite for students, there are a couple of different ways that our teachers are accomplishing that right now. And one way would be to have it be standards or skill focused. And so at this time, I'm working on this skill and I'm inviting these students who demonstrated that they need assistance or some additional support with that skill. But then there are also opportunities that teachers are taking to invite students to one-on-one meetings to have conversations and work through problems and to work through some of the skills that they need to further develop.
Could you expand a little bit on those skills you're talking about? They're inviting them to investigate those skills. What does that mean?
So as teachers are formatively assessing the students on the skills related or associated to the standards for the course, they're identifying where some of those gaps are, and that may be relative to our spring circumstances or may just be relative to a gap in learning as they continue to move forward. And so they might invite a student to come in for one of a portion or the entirety of an office hour time to have one-on-one work, tutoring, instruction, practice with the teacher to help to build that skill. Did I answer your question?
You did. I think I want to ask a couple questions about what you did present, and then I want to talk a little bit about what I don't see here, if that's okay. Do you guys mind if I jump in here? Okay. I think the information that you did present was very interesting. I wanted to clarify on the back page, you talked about an assessment of student readiness for identified courses. And I guess, again, back to the question of who is identifying those courses? So are the teachers do they get input as to the courses that are being identified in order to track? How is that tracking and assessment going? So I'm just curious on where our stakeholders are, our teacher stakeholders are with this whole process.
All of our teachers, all of our teachers have engaged in this work and through their PLC time cross-river as well as within individual buildings to identify what those skill gaps are and to be able to develop plans, action plans, not only around the established standards gaps that we anticipated or perceived from last year, but also to look at, as they continue as a PLC, to look at all 4 of those questions and work to support students on all of the standards. So in terms of which teachers are engaging in this, it's all of our teachers that are engaging in this practice. In terms of those that are specifically identified for college and career readiness, we're following the information from the state and from our district.
Okay, so you're identifying coursework by what you would consider CCR tracking, college and career readiness kind of coursework.
Well, we're looking at like ELA, we're looking at mathematics, science, social studies.
Right, I'm just clarifying that point. Okay. So I think the one thing I want to, well, there's multiple things I want to focus on. So I just wanted to highlight that that our teachers are involved in the process. I just also want to ask that, or make sure that they're getting the supports they need from our administration on this amount of work that they're doing. So I think that's really important that we're giving them the tools in order to make those assessments on the students. So I think as we're looking at the students and the differentiation of skill that each student has and keeping up with or not keeping up with the workload, I think it's really important that we make sure we're either giving them the skill set or the PLC time or whatever it is that they require to have the time to do that. I think that there's still an inconsistency that I see across the high school, not only in regards to student performance, but into instructor assessment. So I'm not sure where that is. So I just want to make sure we're giving everyone the tools that they need and the time they need. The one thing that, well, not one thing, but what I'd like to see that's missing, obviously I know that PSATs and SAT data comes out in November, so we won't have that data, but we did get AP data in the spring. I did send an email out. I know Mrs. Herman is out for personal reasons, and I sent it, I determined you, Dr. Pearson, on it. I would like to see that sent to the board and ultimately to the public. The AP data we had from the spring. I'd like to see how that compares to previous years and kind of sliced and diced as we've seen in previous years by geographic and then by course and by test and all the, remember we did it last year. I think the spring APs would be very interesting. Obviously they might be a different I don't want to say skew, but they might be a little bit different than what we would expect because students were taking them from home. It could be better, it could be worse, we won't know. But it's at least a kind of a set of data that would show us some kind of performance in high school. Sorry, I'm having massive difficulties, I apologize. I think for right now, this little snapshot certainly is helpful, but it's really one of the only true data points we have. I think it's imperative that we share that and be as transparent with that as possible. Obviously, also the concept of attendance or student participation. I know the participation is really hard to measure. It's a very difficult number to measure, but I know the attendance is something that's regularly taken. I would be curious to know where we're at. I mean, districts like U46 are at 95%. So I know in the spring we were less than that. I don't know where we're at this fall. I think that would be a good number for us to share as well. So do we have that data?
Yes.
Okay, do you happen to know it?
I don't have it off the top of my head, no, but we certainly can bring that up to the board. It's part of the goals, so it's part of our reporting cycle. And it's typically also included in the student achievement report that we're bringing to the November learning.
In November, okay.
Correct.
I just think for high school, that's one of the only snapshots we have, truly. It's just difficult. I'm gonna give my 2 cents about what I think is my concern about high school. I mean, in talking with other LUDA partners, my concern is that there's no time for teachers to evaluate students and interact with them right now in the schedule that we have. So in our LUDA districts, they have either block days or AB schedule, like our middle school. It can vary. Regardless, they have a 5th day where they are asynchronous, so the teachers can interact with our student base, their student base. We have a synchronous day. We are the only LUDA district in our comparables that have a synchronous day right now for that 5th day. I am concerned about students that are behind, and then ultimately on the flip side, students that need more work, that need to be evaluated and wouldn't have that one-on-one time to get extra work or get extra support for something that might be more challenging for them. And a little bit to add on to Mr. Bryant's point of just having the instructor have the opportunity and the tools and time in order to really assess each student. And I know you said that's happening. My personal experience as a parent is that's not happening. And I know that's the frustration of other parents. So I don't want it to blow back on the teachers. I just think the function in which we have it set up right now makes it very difficult for them to do that. We're just getting started, so I don't want to throw darts at it yet. But I think it's something we really need to be cognizant and cautious about. So that's pretty much it. I'll review my notes and see if anything else comes up. Thank you.
Just to get a little bit of a different perspective to Ms. Weigel's final comments. I do have a concern after talking with a lot of teachers related to time. I've had the opportunity to talk to several who have expressed concern about having enough time to be able to teach the content that they are being asked to teach. So I worry about that. I worry about that for the teachers, and I also worry about that for the students. Whether they're in standard core classes that they need to be able to get the prerequisites for the next year, or whether they're in the AP classes, which, as we understand, at least today, College Board is not modifying the test as they did last year. So I would want to put that comment out there, and I'm curious as it relates to the skill gap assessments and roadmaps that we did. What is the feedback you're getting from teachers? Are you finding in some of these cases, it appears they've been able to weave it in to the curriculum that they would already be teaching, but I don't know, is that predominantly how they're able to approach that? I would imagine regardless, some of this is taking some additional time.
I would agree that it has taken some additional time, to compile a lot of this data for the presentation today. I would also suggest that in some cases, I think our teachers have found it to be affirming of the work they do. In the afternoon of the time where we asked them to kind of go through and do their second round of work related to this, I did have a teacher pop out of my office really excited about the way that all the skills as they progress from freshman to sophomore, junior year really spiral throughout the curriculum. And this particular teacher went home that evening after a conversation with me and actually created like a 10-slide PowerPoint to show how it all connected. So I do believe that teachers are finding the value in it, and I think it's affirming their work. I think too, as we've indicated, a lot of these skills are really spiral throughout our curriculum to the degree that students have multiple opportunities through their high school experiences to really demonstrate proficiency on those skills. So I do believe that that there was value found from this work, and that it, in fact, has in some cases creates enthusiasm for the work moving forward.
How many of these roadmaps did we do?
Off the top of my head, I don't know how many roadmaps we did, but we did do them for every curricular area, and we did them for several strands within each of the curriculum areas. So for example, as you look at the math map, you'll see the entire math sequence represented there. The same goes for English. Social studies has the majority of them. They don't have quite all of their electives represented, but even in elective areas where we got a class like Autos 3, Autos 3 requires that students are coming to them with some prerequisite knowledge and skills from Autos 2, which also then requires some prerequisite skills and knowledge from Autos 1. So we did make sure that we back mapped, especially our courses that had the sequential learnings, to make sure that we were being cognizant and aware and intentional about the way we're planning our instruction to make sure that we're addressing those potential gaps that existed.
And then another question I had, I think from the examples that you've given and the analysis, the 80 to 100%, I mean, obviously those are very good measures as far as how the students have progressed in efficiency. How many assessments have we done to date? Like, what does that 80 to 100% represent?
Well, I think in some cases it may represent some form of assessment data which may not be something that students have demonstrated over multiple occasions. In some cases, it does represent summative assessment data, in which case, I would suspect that if the summative assessment has been given, that there are plenty of opportunities for students along that learning continuum to demonstrate their learning. So I think it varies depending on which course it is. And so it'd be hard for me to say exactly which, how many data points to have to support the work, but I would infer that those that are representing a level of competency based on summative would have given students multiple opportunities throughout the course of that unit or throughout the course of the semester so far to be able to demonstrate their learning, because ultimately it's their ability to respond to formative assessment data which allows them to increase student learning. And eventually, by the time they reach a summative, a lot of those opportunities would have been woven into that experience for those students.
Let me ask it maybe a little bit differently too. So like for the autos class, for example, I don't think we'll know on that one, right, until the end of the semester. So I'm just curious, out of all of the assessments that have been done, how many have we gotten to the point where we can say, yes, we have been able to close that gap at least, to an 80, 90, 100%.
As I reviewed through many of the documents from each of the departments today, identified that it's roughly 25 to 30% of the courses have had an opportunity to do a formative or summative assessment where they could give us a number, to tell us at this point what the proficiency level is. But again, as you pointed out, with autos, that's something that's embedded and woven throughout the course of this semester with many opportunities for practice and some informal observation style assessments. But it will actually, the skills related to the standard in that particular course will actually be assessed on the final assessment or final performance that the students do in that class. One of the things that we also found in many of our elective classes, especially where perhaps there is a teacher, just one teacher that teaches through the sequence. I'll use music as an example there. For example, if I'm an orchestra teacher, I have the students for all 4 years if they remain in the program for 4 years. And so I know what we were able to accomplish last year and what we didn't quite get to So throughout the summer, those teachers have already folded that in and found ways to enhance those skills that they might not have otherwise done, but certainly it would have been a part of that learning continuum for that class. And so as you look through, and as I've looked through these gap analysis documents, that's one of the things that stands out to me as well. In addition to, in some of the examples that were shared this evening and are in the documents that you have, there are some things that are perhaps a second quarter or a module 3 type of a skill. It's a building block for skills associated with standards at that particular time in the curriculum map. And so that's when that's really going to be focused in on and assessed formatively and summatively.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to jump in real quick because I think my questions sort of relate to Mrs. Frederick's. So regarding the testing, these are not any specialized tests. These are essentially we're teasing this data out of the tests that they're giving. We're not setting aside special days, which I appreciate. Again, we have, especially now that time is at a premium. And so some of this stuff is really kind of figuring out where we were, kind of maybe losses even from last year, right? And so how often are we compiling this data to kind of see where the gaps are? I mean, I know it's a kind of a continuous thing, but how often do we kind of go back? And I don't know if I'm asking this correctly, but do we go back and, I have another question on the testing as well, but do we go back and kind of look at it and say, all right, where are we at?
Like doing mics. With these action plans that the PLCs have developed as related to the gap standards that have been identified, this is an ongoing kind of an action plan and a living document that will go through the course of the year. Because some of the standards are embedded at different times throughout the year, so they are revisiting that, and many of these standards are assessed multiple times, including perhaps on a cumulative assessment at the end of a semester or end of a unit or time period. Did I answer your question?
Can I interject real quick? Would it be possible for us to get another update after the semester ends? That feels like the timing might be right, or?
We're happy to provide you with updates as frequently as you'd like to have them. What she's saying is that the way the document is set up, the PLCs are going in and updating them on a regular basis based on whether or not they've assessed that particular skill. So that's certainly something that we can do. I think it's also important to understand that as a district, we often divide our standards by course, but they're really not written by course. They actually bridge multiple courses, or they spiral through multiple courses and they build skills related to that standard. So many of those things are I don't want to say flexible. We've put them in boxes based on semesters and courses, but we are able, because our teachers have the skill set to do so, to address them in different ways across different courses. So like English is a really good example. The English standards actually go across all of our English courses at the high school. And we separate them out and we build them in a way that it makes sense based on the skill across English 9, English 10, English 11, and the electives at the 12th grade. So I think the orchestra example is actually a really good one because the teachers really have command of the standard at that level and they understand how it builds. And so when they recognize, because not every student develops mastery at the same time either. So just because I took English 9 in a typical school year doesn't mean that I understand the conventions of grammar or writing at a 9th grade level. And I have to continue to build that proficiency when I go into English 10 or when I go into English 11. So it's not as discrete as we've asked teachers to look at this necessarily. What we really wanted to do was capture whether or not there were any significant gaps from the spring, things that we just missed because of the amount of time or because of the structure that we were in. And we also wanted to make sure that understanding that we intentionally addressed those things in this particular school year. But I think it's also good to realize that this work is typically part of the regular PLC process within our departments and within our course teams as well. So I like this document though because they have been intentional, especially in a year where we are faced with some time constraints, just based about the amount of time we have with students in a synchronous format, that they really have targeted in on a few things that they've determined to be really important for the course and really thought about how are we going to assess this and when is that going to happen. So yes, I think after the semester would be a good time to go back.
I'm going to jump in on that point because that was kind of part of I have two more questions really. I'll ask you one real quickly. The testing, the formative summative testing we're not doing any sort of common interims, that's not what we're talking about here, right? Okay. So we're just talking about the data from their own classes. So as they test and use our curriculum to test. I guess the concern that I have, I always, that fourth quarter, we lost it to a great extent. I mean, everywhere, not everywhere, we lost a great deal of what was going on in the fourth quarter. If I had to lose a quarter as a teacher, as far as the level of learning that's going on, usually the fourth quarter is the one I choose to lose. What I'm concerned about now is the first quarter, just because of the time constraints. And it's, again, nobody's fault, it's just the time constraints. And so that's why I was asking about kind of how often we're going to be kind of taking a look at this, because the first quarter is the one that I don't want to lose, right? That's the most important quarter. That's the one where the kids are coming in and really, frankly, learning how to learn with you. And so that's the concern, I guess, that I have as far as this is concerned, is it's, again, it's no one's fault. It's just, that's a concern that I have. And so I want to know, I want to feel more comfortable about what's happening. And frankly, in my own classroom, I'm concerned about what's happening. So, I'm sorry. Questions?
Sure. Okay. So it sounds like you guys are coming back after semester. That was one of the things I wanted to ask. I also wanted, obviously, you guys did more work than was even asked for by the goal. So I was pleased to see that, and that there was value for the teachers who were involved. I do like how it is set up, and it actually is beginning to appear like a tiered system of support. So that's kind of exciting to see. So I'm just wondering if the roadmaps that you created, I don't know if anyone else is interested in a copy of those, but I would like to see a copy of, I'm sure it's quite a volume of work that was done, but since the teachers did it, I would love to see it.
Ms. Parker, I'm sorry, I'm just confirming, I thought we put that in the
Yes.
packet, but I just want to make sure that it's there. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Word book premiere. What can I say? All right, fantastic, never mind.
It's 40 pages.
I missed
It's
that.
not one of these.
I did out a lot of stuff. Okay. Not one of the ones I have. I'll go back in there and cruise through.
All right, any other, she's still going.
I'm still doing both.
All right. I'm not trying to rush you, I just know if you're done.
So I do want to kind of answer the concern about the time for the teachers to teach the content, right? And, per course, per week, right now, we're going to be 35 less minutes than we've had from August to last week. So I'm wondering if in November, part of the plan is to talk about how do we build back in those 35 minutes, and if it isn't, kind of be part of that.
I believe up until this week, we had 180 minutes of instructional time or synchronous time with students. And with this new model, we've increased. So we've decreased on the block days by 5 minutes, but we've increased by 15 minutes on the full remote day. So as an example today, instead of 30-minute class periods that they've had prior, they have 45 minutes for each class period. So it's 185 minutes of instructional time.
Okay. So there isn't anything missing. No, it actually is 5 more minutes. Is that what you're saying?
5 more minutes than what we were previously up until this week.
But to your point, the instructional time is less from where what was proposed before school started and even last year.
Well,
So,
correct, yeah.
yeah.
I do think that having the office hours starting at 1 o'clock will be more heavily utilized than they are currently. And so I think that we'll see that actually, students are getting that individualized attention that they need, the small group attention that they need. It's just not, high schoolers aren't motivated to get up at 7:20, they really don't have to. If they're on the week, they might, that's it. I'm done.
Thank you for the presentation, and the only reason I knew the pathways was there because I opened it up and I go, there's no way I can read all of this and be prepared for tonight. But I appreciate all the work. I mean, this is pretty extensive work. So I have just really one or two questions. But it sounds like from what you've answered is we're targeted, we're connected, and we're skill-based. Based on the standards. And we're surprised. So should we be doing this every year? Are we learning right now through the pandemic because we were concerned that maybe we should be doing this kind of work every year in the beginning and begin to realize what we do in the fourth quarter and what we do in the first quarter? My guess is the teachers would begin to have that conversation about content and skills. Maybe they won't do, I don't even remember how many slides, 10 slides in a PowerPoint to say, aha. But those conversations will change when I realize where the gaps are and where the gaps aren't. So I'm wondering, do you see this process being something we want to consider for the future?
I think as we continue to strengthen our PLC work at the buildings, it's going to be a natural part of those conversations because we know that students are going to need to have some command of prerequisite skills to be successful in that subsequent level of learning. So from that, I think it does behoove us to consider how do we wrap this experience into our normal, typical planning moving forward. So I know that as we step through into second semester, we're going to be engaging some of our staff with more learning related to PLCs, and I think that we have an opportunity second semester as we continue to collect this data to see where some gaps may still exist, and then how to maybe wrap some of our PLC goals around some of those gaps that do exist, as well as provide interventions to the students who, throughout the course of this first semester, still have yet to reach a level of proficiency that we know is necessary for them to be moving forward.
I think one of the hopes I have of the pandemic is that we make some real significant changes and moves in education. And to do that, you have to remember what you did and why you did it. And in the midst of a pandemic, you're also looking at what do I have to do in the next 5 minutes. So it's a layered piece, but when you have 3 minutes and you're driving home, maybe put in your parking lot, you gotta remember this. Please thank your staff for this hard work. This is really important work. I'm real impressed by what our kids are able to remember and do. And I think that goes to what we have been doing with them, plus what their families have done to support them. So thank you for your work.
Mr. Richter, can I ask you a follow-up on what you just said? I think it was really important what you just said about the planning for the gap strategies for intervention. With your instructors as they're learning now, and able to see it because you're doing an analysis on it that you've never done before. I guess, what kind of work are they doing to come up with more interventions for strategies, or strategies for interventions, I should say? Or is that something you're still in progress or process with?
I think at the teaching level, the tier 1 level, our teachers are always using what they learn through their PLC work and through the professional learning networks to figure out what are those instructional strategies which are going to reach the widest range of students, as well as those that might target into some individual pockets of students who might need more help. And in any given year, it might be different. You know, I, as a learner, may jump into a teacher's class and there may be something that I need to grasp a concept or to develop a skill that no other student before me has needed. So I think that's a very natural part of the PLC work that we do. I do think that, you know, a conversation about interventions beyond Tier 1, beyond the classroom is going to be part of our ongoing work through the MTSS committee. And I am certainly excited for the opportunity to continue to explore what some of those options and opportunities might be. But I do believe that at the Tier 1 level and the classroom level, our teachers are having those conversations to be able to find out how to reach their students as best as possible.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to only pick on you. I'm assuming it's the same at both high schools. So, all right, thank you so much. That's really good to hear. I think that's definitely, to Mrs. McCabe's point, where we need to focus on, regardless of pandemic or no pandemic, is to how do we reach those kids that need the help that might not be asking for it. So, thanks.
I'm gonna just kind of assume this seems like it's work that you've always done. It's just maybe more intense this time. I mean, because it's really essentially PLC work. It's just being done probably with more specificity this time around. So I'm fairly certain it will continue anyway.
I do think that it is with more specificity, especially looking at identifying gaps, just given our circumstances in the spring.
Right.
It is the PLC work, but what it did was it created a common template across an entire department, the entire school, the entire high school component of the district. And so that was what was more different than anything in this process.
I'm confident that it's that this kind of work would be something that would continue. So, all right. Anybody else with Mr. Bryant? Look like you might be ready to.
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the update.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is the update on social emotional learning goals.
I work with people like this. I have to step my game up once in a while. Thank you for noticing. Hi, everybody. We're here tonight to share with you our SEL benchmark data from the fall. My name is Patty Pelagi, and I'm the Director of Instructional Interventions. And I have Kate Vincent with me here today, and she's going to introduce herself and share her role in the district.
Hi, my name is Kate Vincent. I'm glad to be here tonight, both at the board meeting and here in District 303. As Patty said, I am the Assistant Director of Instructional Interventions for the district. In that role, I specifically oversee our ASD program at both Davis Primary and Pearson Creek Elementary Schools for our students impacted by adverse effects related to autism spectrum disorder. I also co-facilitate our social work and elementary resource departments, support special education at a handful of our elementary buildings, and oversee all of the verbal intervention and de-escalation, as well as nonviolent crisis prevention intervention training here in our district.
So we will be sharing our fall data with you, along with insights gleaned from the MTSS Committee and Learning and Teaching Department. The data is relatively fresh, and building leadership teams are continuing to review and create action steps appropriate to their needs. We have provided a copy of the presentation for you to take notes. We'll be happy to answer any questions at the conclusion of our presentation. Also, we'll be back in November as a component of the Student Learning Outcomes and Goals presentation. When sharing an MTSS update with you in August, the move to the ECRA SEL survey was reviewed. The shift to the ECRA tool provides an additional layer to students' personal learning pathway, or PLP, allowing for a more holistic view of students. Including this information in a student's PLP provided necessary dimension to understand the strengths and needs of the entire student. Beginning to survey students in the second grade recognizes the developmental nature of the acquisition of social emotional skills and places the emphasis where needed, the explicit teaching and integration of SEL as an important component of core or tier 1 at the primary grades. ECRA's SEL survey probes beyond emotional identification and seeks insights on students' use of skills, allowing for more focused understanding of strengths and challenges from the student to district level. The ECRA survey is not a diagnostic tool. Rather, it's a universal measure designed to assess students' use of specific developmentally informed social and emotional learning skills aligned to the CASEL core competencies and ISB's SEL state standards. These skills foster students' ability to build positive relationships with others, work collaboratively, weigh consequences of decisions, set goals based on personal strengths and challenges, understand situations from various perspectives, and more effectively cope with internal and external stressors. It's important to note that social emotional learning is referencing the instructional supports integrated into our school system. We utilize the MTSS framework to determine what all, some, and a few students need to master each of the SEL competencies. This data supports direct SEL instruction aimed to target all students while identifying those in need of additional instruction, intervention, and support.
The ECRA survey is aligned to the CASEL core competencies and ISB's SEL standards. The survey provides insights to students, families, and staff in the domains of responsible decision-making, self-regulation, and social relationships. Surveys are available for grades 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Reports are generated to reflect individual student, grade, building, and district level data on the 3 domains. District 303 has historically prioritized the social emotional learning needs of students and families. This was evident in the resources provided to students and families when moving to remote learning, as well as in our planning for the 2020-2021 school year. Across the spring, students and families engaged in various learning activities each Friday, focused on the SEL competencies. When I joined the district in July, I was fortunate enough to participate in the work of our Social Emotional Health and Wellbeing Reopening Task Force, which continued these efforts by prioritizing connection before content, providing professional learning for staff, providing necessary resources to families, and strengthening partnerships with community agencies. Resources were created and shared with students and families to assist in navigating the grief associated with loss of transitions, wearing masks and social distancing in classrooms and in hallways. The SEL competencies framed every aspect of the task force's efforts, recognizing and planning to support the competencies for both students and adults. Professional development targeted these domains through explicit teaching of structures and routines to support responsible decision-making and self-regulation, focus on belonging and acknowledgement to foster social relationships, and use of integrated SEL instruction through morning meeting at the elementary level, and the 3 signature practices at the secondary level to further develop self-regulation, social relationships, and responsible decision-making through goal setting and growth mindset. Highlighting the need for Tier 1 or core integrated SEL practices prior to the return of students, whether in person or remote, provided a strong start to the 2020-2021 school year. As a board, you have demonstrated your commitment to students' mastery of the social emotional learning standards. Your goal for the 2020-2021 school year utilizes information gained through the ECRA survey. The ECRA survey asked students to rate themselves on 36 items across 3 domains on a 5-point scale, with 1 representing the student's own perception of relative weaknesses, and 5 representing the student's own perception of relative strengths. Your goal seeks to increase the overall score of students who rate themselves at a 2.9 or lower. At the present time, we have 121 students district-wide whose overall rating fell at 2.9 or less. At all grades, students responded to questions asked in the affirmative. This data distribution is not dissimilar to our district academic or iReady data, which indicated that the majority of students meet grade level standards. For this reason, the focus of SEL instruction remains at the Tier 1 or universal level, with increased interventions in terms of both duration and frequency for all students. In addition, the survey provides additional data for staff to reference as they assess individual student need for interventions at both the Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels. Similar to our iReady academic benchmark data that was shared last week, we see slightly lower scores for our subgroups on the APRA survey. This information provides an additional data point and a topic for our building leadership teams to consider in their planning.
In reviewing the fall benchmark data, we considered the various learning environments of our students. There were no significant differences between those engaged in remote versus in-person or hybrid settings. It was noted that the largest grade level with an overall score of 2.9 or lower was at the second grade level, which we feel reflects the developmental nature of SEL standard mastery. The data before us represents one data point from which to hypothesize next steps. Reviewing data across benchmark periods will assist us with creating focused action items. The initial review of data by L&T and the MTSS committee noted self-regulation as lower across all grade levels. Scores in this domain ranged from 3.90 to 4.2, which represents relatively strong scores overall. We will continue to monitor all three domains of the EQUIS survey with specific focus on self-regulation at subsequent benchmarks so we can better understand district, grade level, and building data trends to inform decisions about SEL instruction across the tiered framework. Included here are questions from the self-regulation domain from the EQUIS survey in each of the levels, along with the percentage of students who responded to these questions as either strongly agree or agree. This aggregated district data will be beneficial to building leadership teams and professional learning communities and setting improvement goals based on their building survey results. This information can be used to design additional professional learning for teaching and embedded SEL standards, as well as additional supports or interventions for identified students. District 303's commitment and prioritization of SEL standards has supported students across our district. As a learning community, we recognize the impact of our school closure and start of the 2021 school year on the social emotional health and well-being and planned proactively. The data from the fall benchmark will assist buildings in setting improvement goals to meet the needs of all students. The board goal, as written, will assist students in need of additional support to acquire the identified lagging skills in the three SEL domains through direct teaching and integrated SEL instruction. Additional review of winter and spring survey results will further drive data-informed decisions at the Tier 1. We look forward to returning in November and sharing additional insights as part of the student learning outcomes and goals presentation. Thank you again for having us here this evening, and we'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Anyone have any?
Thank you. Are we going around?
I'm trying to alternate which side I start on, so. Mrs. McKay.
Thank you for the presentation and welcome, Ms. Vincent. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
I just wanted to focus a little bit more on the self-regulation part, but I wondered, did we give this assessment to our bilingual students?
Yes.
So we do it in the Spanish?
Yes.
All right. Yes. That wasn't separated out. Is that we went by as
By ethnicity, so I can look for that.
I don't know if it's worth digging into, but that might be
I don't know that it would be significantly.
don't know what the equity kind of conversation is. So I wondered if you could, the graph shows that self-regulation is lower than the overall. And looking at it, that just kind of stands out. And I wondered, you look at high school and if you're there, it looks so much lower. I know percentage-wise, it's probably not. So could you talk just a little bit about how you teach self-regulation? I don't want a course, but how does it build itself up so that when we get to high school, I could answer how I handle stress. Not just because I spent time with the social worker, but because I went to D303 schools and we've talked through this. Tell us how that would look, how it should look, where we might need to think about.
Right, so as we talk about SEL and the acquiring of the skills associated with the competencies or standards, we talk both about explicit instruction because some of this information needs to be directly taught, just like you would be a learner in theory of reading. And then the other is the integration part. So learning the competencies from the student point of view as well as the staff's point of view, so that not only am I teaching what those strategies may be, but I'm also modeling for you because I, as a staff member, as an adult in your life, recognize and understand those SEL competencies and how they work for me so that I can model that strategy. So as you get older, it's more about recognizing that in this moment and situation, I used a strategy when I felt like I needed it. And I think it's a lot of those executive functioning skills. That's why I provided the example of some of the questions that kids were asked to, from their perspective, how they felt they did in those areas. So I think some of it too is making some of that more visible for them to say, you did just use a strategy. And I don't know, Kate, if maybe you want to add anything to that.
I think that's a great answer. I think that modeling piece is very important, especially when we talk about younger students. So being able to stop an instruction and say something like, oh, Miss Vincent feels a little bit frustrated. Which coping strategy should I use? I'm going to take a deep breath and like really pointing it out and working through it the same way you would break down phonology when you're talking about reading. We're almost looking at SEL the same way. So we're also building in strategies within our classrooms so that students aren't just getting SEL in social work, they're getting SEL in their classroom. That looks like our morning meeting. That looks like the use of our 3 signature practices. And then that looks like that focus on belonging for all kids.
So another opportunity of the pandemic is that we're all under stress and anxiety. So classroom teachers could use that as a teachable moment if they recognize their own skills and strategies. So I assume that we know that conversation happens at many different areas, but maybe how it focuses in their instruction, is that part of the conversation you're having with teachers?
Yeah, so adult SEL, if you look at the CASEL rubric for school and district-wide SEL and the CASEL reopening roadmap, one of the things that they highlight, that CASEL highlights, is this focus on adult social emotional learning. So what we're doing for students, we're also mirroring and reflecting for ourselves as adults. So again, that idea of connection before content, thinking about how can we continue to foster those connections among our adult learning communities, make their classrooms safe spaces to model these types of strategies. And with that comes certain vulnerability. So giving permission and space, and then also providing examples of what that can look like across developmental levels. It's going to look different for a 2nd grade student than it would for an 11th grade student.
Yeah, there's been an awful lot in, the educational, professional reading journals and whatnot about the impact of our school closure in this world that we live in right now and what about it we might keep. I think the work that we engaged in through the task force this summer and how we supported teachers as they entered into this school year is a great example. We had, for probably the first time, at least in this community, examples of trauma that all students engaged in. And so we can talk about being trauma informed, but like now's the time to really put some of those strategies in place. And I feel like we had a more active audience across levels because folks saw and could see that coming back to school was going to look very different than it has ever looked before. So yes, I had to explicitly teach structures and routines. Yes, I had to be very open and honest and very transparent in what the expectations are. If you walk into a kindergarten classroom, you know, in August, you see that in action because it must happen. You don't always see it at the middle school and high school levels, but this year we had staff members who recognized that, you know, social distancing and walking in the hallways was going to look different. Being in a Google Classroom in a Schoology course was going to be different. So I had to be far more explicit in how I was sharing that information with students. All of those are components of social emotional learning, because knowing that and having that information so clearly shared with me reduces any level of anxiety that I might have related to what's coming next and what's expected. So there are certainly, in this particular area, have been some growth that we have seen and opportunities to support staff that we haven't had in the past. So I'll take that as a win. Because I think our teachers have benefited and certainly our kids have as well.
When I was talking to Mr. Richter about putting those things for let's not forget, and it may be that when you come back in November, I am wondering how we can help as a board to support the work. If a goal is required to help hold that accountability to the whole district, I'm sure this board would be willing to look at that. Resources, Mr. Blomquist reminded us it isn't just a score, we're talking about real human beings and relationships. So this is really important. It is clearly important for the board and the administration. So I thank you for the work, and I know we're just getting the data. This is still new, but we have a pandemic with an opportunity to really build a stronger educational system for our kids. So thank you.
I'm just going to take the opportunity here to point out that 3 times, as Mrs. McCabe discussed, strategies for looking, she used the pandemic as an opportunity. I think that's probably one of the strategies that you guys try to teach. So I kind of chuckled there, and I think I was the only one, but.
I heard.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments?
So I'm curious, 129 doesn't seem like all that many students. That to me was honestly a little surprising. And so when I look at it, there's 90 students between 2nd through 8th grade, and there's 39 high schoolers. Is that correct? Am I right on that one? With a score of 2.9 or lower. How accurate do you feel that students were answering? And then I'm wondering how many didn't take it. What was our take to not take ratio?
I think 92% of our students take the assessment. So that is something for us to kind of be mindful of. It's the first time they took the survey. Some students took it over the summer. We did have students take it before they came to school, but we had even less participation at that point. So, I mean, whenever it's our first data point is how we're kind of looking at it. We've had conversations about were kids telling us what they thought they wanted us to hear versus how they truly perceive themselves as having those skills. And then we had quite a few students who responded in the kind of middle range, like not sure, which I think is something really interesting for us to investigate a little bit more fully. But again, this is a survey that's asking students for their perceptions of how they are doing in these areas.
Is there with, for example, is there, a part that, can be, just students, is there any adult portion of that that could be utilized? Is there like a next level where you have, a teacher select any part of that?
Right, I mean, like with all of our universal screening type data, this is step one. So, as we kind of aggregate and look at groups of students, is it representative? If we have students that kind of fall off to one end or the other, or we don't feel that it's representative, then that's when we would go to a diagnostic type tool. And those typically involve all folks. So if it's an older student, it would be a survey or some type of a rating scale for the student to complete, something potentially for the family and then the teacher.
Thank you.
One quick thing that popped up in my head because she was asking about the percentage who didn't take it. Sounds like 8% didn't take it. I guess mostly kind of what is your thought on those 8% who didn't take it? Do you think they might skew one way or the other? In other words, would they increase or would their percentage be comparable or lower relative to the 92% who picked? In other words, might there be something connected with their not taking it?
And that is an interesting point that I have not investigated, but I'm happy to do so. And I think that those are some of the digging deeper type conversations that Kate and I have already had and hope to have more of that information for you when we see you next month.
Just to follow up on Ms. Barker's question about the test. We did switch screeners this year. Do you feel that there was a big difference and I know you can't compare one screener to the other, but in general, I guess my question is, do you feel you were getting the data that you were expecting? And how does it compare to what has been used in the past?
It's funny because right before I came over here, I gave some thought to that, and I do feel that when we reported out last year, it was still kind of that self-regulation, kind of being able to problem solve. What do I do when I get stuck? What do I do if I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed? Also percolated very highly at the middle school and high school level. So we're kind of seeing that same trend. I think the thing that I really, the Sabre screener was like 16 questions and this one is 36. So I feel like we have more data to dig into with this measure. And it's also more strengths-based so that we can talk with students about, well, yeah, you may not have done as well in this particular area, but look at this great strength that you have. How can you use that to help you over here, which we weren't able to get that with the other measure. So overall, I'm happy with the data. And I think it provides the buildings and classroom teachers with a lot of information to dig into.
It's also a little bit different in terms of how the questions are phrased. So some of the questions that we see on ECRA actually ask students to assess their use of skill versus asking students to assess or identify whether they experience an emotion. So on Sabres, you might see questions like, I feel sad, versus I know what to do or how to get help when I feel sad. So it's targeting that skill versus that feeling, which I think is important.
To follow up on that, then, I guess, does this assessment help us identify students that need help, or how does it help us identify students that understand how to regulate and actually, because it sounds like it's more assessing what they can do or what they cannot do, and not so much how they feel. Are we able to identify those students that might need that help?
So yes, and I feel like with our other diagnostic or our universal screeners or benchmark tools, this gives us an idea of what it is that we're doing for all students. Is it working or not working? And is there an area that we need to look at differently? So it gives us that kind of overarching picture. That's step one. And then to dig in for students that maybe their results were surprising to us. So it could be that this is a student that maybe hadn't popped for whatever reason. And then I think our staff across levels have already done a really great job of identifying students who have significant needs. This data may confirm that, may provide them with an area that they can develop and build some skills around. But I would say that this is one step in it, but there's definitely a plethora of other types of data points that are helping them with students who may have increased social emotional needs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Palagi, and welcome. Thank you for your hard work on this. Kate, I wanted to touch base on a couple things you said. One, you said we are reaching out to and making sure we're touching base with the students we have concerns for. Are we specifically using this as a measuring tool now to get in touch with the students that come in on the lower end of the scoring as well, as to the other way people were reaching out?
I mean, the way that I've organized the data and what I've done with the survey data that we've had in the past is just rank order it and then share it with buildings so that they can see the students whose scores were more concerning at the top. So they use that data alongside of data that they already have to follow up if need be. I would say that it's right now, especially at the middle school and high schools, there's other systems in place that are helping them in that area more so than this universal screener, since it's done 3 times a year.
And it seems like, I would agree with Mrs. McCabe, there's an opportunity, I'm gonna steal your word, at the high school and 8th through 11th or 8th through 12th grade levels for us to continue that education and reaching out to our teachers. And I would kind of reiterate what I said to Principal Richter before about the fact that I think conceptually it's a good idea that we're doing this and you're hitting some of the teachers. I would agree that if we can help this to be more equitable across all teacher levels in those grades, we're happy to help that along. I think, again, the inconsistency between grade levels, between teaching styles and schools makes it very difficult for social emotional interventions as well as academic equity discussions happening to be congruent. And so I certainly would like us to continue to work on that, to continue to make things more equitable. I think there's just so many inconsistencies that you see. Some families have success stories and some don't. And I just think that's an area for us to work on. I do have a question about the ECRA pages, the student pages. Is it ECRA page? ECRIS?
Yes.
The ECRIS pages?
The PLPs?
Yes. Still learning. Are we utilizing that ability to complete those pages per student yet? So I think at one point we were going to have guidance counselors or someone or teachers input data. Are we doing that yet for students?
Thank you, Dr. Pearson.
Yeah, so Dr. Burns is actually the best person to answer that question. She coordinates that work for us, so let's have her come and answer that.
I just know it kind of ties into this. It's not quite the same, but.
Yeah, great question. So the personalized learner profile is in its 2nd year of implementation at the high school and its 1st year of implementation at the middle school. And we have been meeting with the counselors as well as the assistant principals to be implementing our plan on a monthly basis.
Okay, so do we have any idea of the saturation of completion, like for the student body of a high school? So say there's 2,000 students, do we know how many student profiles we've even touched?
So I can get a more accurate answer at the high school, but at the middle school, it's 100%.
Okay.
That has started.
Okay.
And this information is automatically uploaded, so it's there.
I have peeked at a few in high school, that's why I was asking. I think it's a little more spotty, but I think that would certainly help us in our road to reaching the 100% of students as we continually utilizing that tool. It's awesome that you've done 100% at middle school. That's great work.
So at the high school this year, we're starting with a personal statement as well as goal setting using their 1st quarter grades.
Okay. it's a great tool. If any parents have not poked around in yours, students, I highly recommend you do. It's pretty, just to look at the fields, it's pretty awesome. It's gonna be a wonderful tool once it's up and running for K through 12. It is really gonna be very helpful, I think, for our student body. It's pretty neat. Sorry to geek out on you about that, but.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay. We do have one more item, but I think, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sorry, I'm moving in. Thank you very much for your time and work into that presentation. Before we go into the facility master plan change statement, I think we're going to we've been here for about 2 hours. So maybe we can take a quick break to go to the washroom. Is this going to be time consuming?
It depends on how much discussion you want to have.
Well,
It could be over in 2 minutes if we.
well, I just don't want to keep people. Would you prefer to press on or take a?
I guess it just depends. I would like to get up. I can just do that on my own.
Okay. All right. Then I guess we will press on. Facility master plan change statement is up next.
Okay, while Mrs. Barker stands up. And our Dan is here. Dan, I apologize, I've forgotten your last name.
You have to press the little guy. There we go.
Thank you. I always thought it was an ear when I started. So Mrs. Barker and I worked together based on the facts that we had met with the CAC exec team and had heard our comments at the board meeting. And as we looked at what Wold had provided us for a charge, it looked like it was missing pieces that we had discussed as a board, as well as some of the questions that had come up at the CAC. So what you have in front of you is the Wold comment, the Wold charge with our additions. We didn't take anything out of what they put in, but everything in green is what we have added. So what, the big thing is we added the word educational to the facility planning committee charge, mainly to just make sure that this isn't just about bricks and mortar. This is about environment for learning. And using that term is what we decided to do. This is a draft. You're welcome to chew on it, spit it out, do whatever. And I hope you had time to look at it so that you've thought through it a little bit. The other piece that's going on throughout this is the timeline. And as we talked to the CAC exec team, they were concerned about how fast and rigorous this timeline was. And how would they report, how would they study, the need for more time to be sure. And I think when we talked as a board, we were looking to try to get this done before the board election. And I think Mrs. Barker and I were hearing, slow it down just enough so that it is the best plan we can produce under the circumstances. So part of what we did was we added in here language that would allow it to go longer if needed. So we didn't say, we kept the January reporting to the board and March, but it could be that as the work goes on with Wold, we will want it to go longer. So that's in here with language that would allow that to happen. We also heard from the CAC exec team that they really would like to present to the community and get feedback. And so we added a bullet point to that piece, that during this process, and that we wanted to be flexible enough so that as they go through their focus groups and they begin to talk about it, they may come up with more ideas to bring back to the board about further community input. So that's added in there to just say, we want community feedback before the board votes on anything, and that they may come up with even better strategies to do that. Okay, now into the part on the charge itself. I don't think we have a green copy of that. So we broadened it a little bit. I wanted to put in, you can dream as you go through this process, decide to take the word dream out. But we want a comprehensive plan that goes beyond the current use of the buildings and considers other possibilities at the buildings and locations of programs. So when we started talking about, you know, this program versus this program, we want folks to really think beyond what they have right now. If you read the interviews of the principals, you'll see that it's pretty much what my building looks like today. They didn't do the dreaming part. We want the focus groups to do a little more than just, we need new storage. We want them to think about what the future of these educational environments will look like. And we also added in that we want the strategic commitments and goals to be the focus, curriculum and instruction needs, and equity of programs. As well as, there was nothing in the charge about administration or support buildings where administration is held. So we put in there an additional bullet point for current, consider the needs of the district level facilities and support services. So that is included in the work. I think everything, we also included projected enrollment and various grade level configurations because of our conversation about K2 through 5. It's also possible they may come up with something totally different than what we're thinking about, where the programs are located. Instead of just saying, is early childhood in the right place? We really want them to think about all programs and locations and why, and begin to have those deeper conversations. I think those are the overall things. So, I think what we need to decide on is about first of all, if there's any language you want to change, you can talk to us about that. The timeline is important. Also, I think Dr. Pearson's still here. Open meetings. And what we should do in terms of what should be in an open meeting and what shouldn't be in an open meeting. Because under the CAC, it's a committee meeting. So Thursday is going to be an open meeting. Mrs. Barker and I will facilitate the opening and turn it over to Dan, and then they will get the overall view. But then we have focus groups, and that's where Mrs. Barker and I won't be attending. Do we need to consider open meetings? So Mrs. Barker or Dan, do you have any additions?
No, my comments were, this is right on. I think it just basically personalizes your charge statement to D303. So I didn't see any changes that caught my attention that steer people in the wrong direction. I think the one blank that we left open was on the enrollment projection. That's something we probably want to fill in. And the data is telling us that it's on a slight decline, and I think it's fair to put that into the document just so that the members know that that's the track it's on right now. That information continues to be tested and vetted. But other than that, it was just a meeting. You know, when you get to these focus group meetings of 10 to 12 to 13 people, I'm guessing just based on the full number at that level, how do you want to handle that invitation to others outside of that group to be part of that meeting? Because those were intended to be live meetings versus our kickoff meeting will be virtual.
Can I back this up just a half a second? So at the board retreat, we talked about how it felt like we missed a step in relation to the board's input and us kind of talking about the design and talking with other people about how they do their facility utilization plan. There's three parts of it. The physical condition of the building, which you handled, Mr. Credite, and I didn't bring it, but our massive book. The capacity utilization, which I think we covered. And then the education alignment or the adequacy part. Like, meaning what do we want to do with what are our goals, or to your point, the dreams. I understand, so I'll even explain it more. What are the 21st century learning modalities or experiences that we want for students in the next 10 years? What do they need to get the skills to excel in the 21st century learning environments? In other processes, the board, the administration, and through the principal interviews come up with some of those conceptual ideas. And then they've created that list and the structure of what they want to visualize. And then a baseline of that list is given to the community for their input of those modalities and experiences and programs. And how does that fit with the facilities that we have? Or how do we improve those facilities to make them fit, or do we change them up? To your point, what do we do with them? I feel like we are jumping in the middle of this process of, okay, we have the learning spaces, we have community spaces, but we haven't really talked about what are the things we want to see. I mean, you talked about them in general. We want to see technology and education, educational programming goals, but we haven't talked about them specifically. I don't know. I mean, personally, from the feedback I've gotten from other districts, I feel like that's the charge of this board. I don't know if I sit alone on that, but that's what I feel like we're supposed to be doing.
That's what the strategic commitments and goals are. The 4 pillars that we have agreed to, it's on our website, are part of what, if you read them closely, and our CAC has gone through those. So we've talked about what those mean. Those are innovative, personalized kinds of things that we believe that all children should get when they come to D303. And they're pretty specific. So in my head, that was already done. It was already in place when I came on the board. It's pretty impressive as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know, I can see why you would think that, because I'm not sure what you did as a board to put those together. But
let me rephrase. Other districts who have goals already and commitments, when they sit with their architecture company and spend $200,000, they redo that and they make that part of it. So I guess my question is to Mr. Critta and Dr. Pearson. Was that a step that you guys discussed that we decided to give to the community to do initially, or was that not discussed? I mean, it seems atypical that we are not doing that step. Does that make sense? You're giving me a quizzical look.
Yeah, I guess the question becomes, what's first? it's really a chicken or egg question, right? So in this particular scenario, the community's gonna have a broader discussion about kind of what do you envision, what is it you hope to see in our schools based on the guidelines that the board has established. And then they're gonna come back in the short term and just report out what they've discovered in these focus groups. At that point, you as a board can say, yes, we agree with that, that's exactly on track, that's what we're looking for, continue, we're gonna go to the next step. Or you can say, you know what, it's completely off base, and we would like to look more into this area or have this piece. So you can do it this way, or you can do it the way that you have described, which is lay out really clearly, like we want X, Y, and Z. I guess.
As a starting point, just as a starting point.
As a starting point. I guess what Mrs. McCabe is saying is that there's a lot of X, Y, and Z in this charge already, as far as conceptual framework is concerned. If there's more specificity that you want than that, then we need to stop this whole process and give the board the opportunity to have those conversations at a deeper level before we use the time of the community members, because we don't want to waste their time either.
Right.
And that's really important, which I think is one of the reasons why Mrs. Barker and Mrs. McCabe tried to put some more detail in here so that there was some more clarity for those groups. That being said, I mean, Mr. Critic can speak to this. The process that you as a board approved when you selected Wold as an architect is being followed exactly according to that roadmap. And this is the next step in that process. So if we want a different process, then we need to provide some clarity as to what that needs to be.
I think, we also have to remember that we're going about this, not like, many districts go about this with a bigger idea in mind. They kind of know that, hey, we need to do some building, maybe we need an extra school. We're not at that point right now. We know that our facilities could use an updating. We don't really know what that is. We don't know what the technology might look like. We don't know what the educational space might look like. And I think getting the feedback from the community at this point is probably the correct thing to do, to see what they want, what they might need. And then we can get some clear ideas and have those discussions. So I understand what you're saying, but I think we're also coming at this from a different angle than many other districts do.
So I think I'm hearing that. Yeah, I can't get it to give me closer. Okay. So I'm hearing that we do want to get more specific, but maybe the best time to do that is after January, and that we need to leave some time somewhere on a meeting where we can have a more lengthy discussion following presentation of the recommendations, the findings, so that we can get more specific on what we want for the next part of the journey. Does that sound like something that you've seen before?
Yeah, I think all the responses are answering Ms. Weibel's question. What we typically see in this process, and knowing that your sight lines are fairly defined, or where this is going to go as far as the size and the scale, we typically ask these focus groups in this long-range planning committee or facility planning committee to create the criteria or the needs through this next step of the process. And that gets played back to the board, but they're using your strategic commitments as the framework. So, and I thought they're robust. I think it's a great guideline for a committee to say, here's our starting point. And we don't want them to stray from those commitments. We want them to define more specificity or get a little more granular on what does it really mean in the buildings to adopt these large guiding principles and turn them into more specific needs. But that's what the first layer is them playing back. Here's the criteria, here's the things we think we need to solve, and letting the board have a chance and Dr. Pearson have a chance to respond to that. Before we go into an options development, which is the second layer of this, is to say, okay, how would we go about meeting all these needs and making sure that we're still staying on course with the commitments?
So my thought on that, as we were talking, as Mr. Bryan said as well, we're not looking to build, and in fact, that's why I think it's probably critical that we do include in there that we have a slight decline, which means we're not as many boards going with the charge of where are we going to put all these kids kind of a thing. We don't have that. what we have is how are we best going to utilize these assets we already have? And I think right now they've kind of helped define kind of what those assets are and what some of their functionality may be. And I think this now is the time or not right now, but soon is the time for us to delve into those specifics. So I'm comfortable with the direction with the path that it's taking. Like I said, I think that's probably why it may look a little different than it does in other cases.
So let me just put this disclaimer out there, because we're already hearing community rumbles that, we've talked about a lot of different programs already at the board level. We've talked about a college career readiness, the Northeast Academy, like you said, the preschool program. I'm missing some of the, some people want to talk about all-day kindergarten. I can't remember what the other programs are, but we've talked about a lot of different programs. And I know people are going to want to talk about facilities as well. We've already had some community members talking about saving buildings and how they've been the savior of buildings. So I just want to caution the community that these are hypothetical discussions and conceptual ideas that we're talking about. And these are not hard and fast decisions that are coming down the pike. We don't need anyone to feel that they have to stand up and say that they're going to save a building. Anything that goes on with the facilities as we go through these hypothetical, conceptual, dreamlike discussions will be to potentially repurpose a facility to a more appropriate demographic, for instance. That's the whole charge of this process. So I just I think that's maybe my concern or caution as we roll this out to a very large community with a lot of opinions, that we put a disclaimer out there that, this is the beginning of this process and that nothing is going to be set in stone. It's a discussion. So I guess that's my only word of caution.
And just as a follow-up process question to that, for this planning committee, who's going to give them the parameters around some of the programs that the board has already dreamed about, all-day kindergarten being one example? Like, who's going to give them that guidance so they can consider that when they're talking about facilities and stuff?
So we typically would invite someone in from the district to talk to, for instance, the Learning Spaces group would be probably more keen on what programs are going in different buildings and what's existing to get them to speed. That would be, you could call it guest speaker or somebody that comes in one of the focus groups, probably the first one that talks about, here's the programs that we have in place, here's the programs that we're talking about considering, whether it's all day K or whatever it might be, to give that committee a broader idea of what's already existing in the district and what might be, do we need to start looking at how to handle a program that doesn't have space or support yet in the facilities.
And so is your team prepared to do that?
Yeah, so we have actually talked about who's going to be the liaison to each of these different focus groups from the leadership team. For example, Mr. Baird's doing the facilities, the physical building one. Someone from Learning and Teaching, either Dr. Herman or someone else from that department, depending on the conversation. Actually, several of them may participate because they have different levels of expertise. Some are more elementary versus secondary. But it's really as a resource for the team, because I think the process of the focus groups is for them to kind of think bigger, but to also provide the constraints. So.
Okay, and will those individuals have enough comfort and awareness of discussions that the board has had? And I keep coming back just because it's a very easy one, like all-day kindergarten comes to mind. And I just would want to make sure that whoever is coming to those groups is representing strategic thoughts that the board has expressed, in addition to strategic concepts that district leadership might have.
I think we have a kind of a running list of those, but I can certainly confirm that and make sure that we're all on the same page. So yes, we can make sure.
Okay. I think that would help my comfort level, just in the sense of the board being represented. Just that we see the running list of whatever that will be reported out to the CAC. And that way, whatever concepts we've recommended, even at whimsy at the board table, is at least represented and thrown out there. And I think maybe that will help some of my chicken or the egg process issue I have.
I think we also have to be careful that we are one board in one period of time. And we're talking a decade. So I am a strong believer in early childhood center. The community may come back and say, guess what? We don't like it. Am I gonna be the one board member who's gonna, am I gonna push my agenda into that focus group? That's not my role. My role will be when they bring the recommendations and we have the discussion at the table. So I think, having gone through this process both as a participant and as an administrator, it is really a deeper discussion than what we even do at the board table.
I would just, in response to that, I would hope, this is a 10-year plan, so I would hope that even after this immediate board has moved on, that other boards are continually dusting that off and reevaluating it based on the needs and the circumstances of the time. So my only point is, I think it will be counterproductive for the committee or the focus groups to not have some awareness of some of the items that this board would like to be considered. And that considered is the key. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen.
And that's part of why we drafted it the charge because we had talked about locations, we had talked about grade level configurations, and instead of giving them, I'm gonna use the word again, I'm sorry. At least it's not organic. Giving them a broad enough look at something so then they have the opportunity to go in and do something that we hadn't even thought about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that very thing. I think it really will come down to how it's presented to that group. Because to your point, they may have thoughts that they've seen in other districts or experienced when they lived in another state that we had never even thought of. So absolutely.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
There's only 7 of us.
And I think the other piece that's going to be really helpful to us is they're going to report to us regularly. We've been, and that's in the charge, that they will come and update us on a regular basis, whether it's a group from the focus group or if it's Mr. Critter, whatever way we can get updates so that we can help, oh, I got a question about that. And I think that will help our process as well.
Thank you, ladies, for working on the charge, by the way. Appreciate that.
I just want to add one thing that I see that, or actually I do not see it, is there going to be anything with land and property? I'm not seeing that on those bullets anywhere. Is there any analysis of the property that we own?
I think the detailed look at any property would be a function of these committees or focus groups asking us if there's a need to develop something or test those sites for something to be developed. So if that's what comes out of the focus groups, then we'll take that next step and analyze feasibility of the site. So I think that, because I don't know what we don't have more testing yet as far as use of property that you might have that could be used for other purposes.
Is that what you had in mind, the use of the property or divestiture of the property?
I think a little bit of both. I would be curious to know, just to have a look, how much property is there, what's the acreage?
Like a laundry list of asset.
Yeah.
The property.
Yes, it comes down to, the same thing as every building we own, it would be nice to know the land that we have as well.
I'm kind of looking around here. I think I might have been the only one around when we had a discussion about that, so now I feel old. But we had a discussion specifically about pieces of property that we owned, and there was certainly discussion about what we would do with that property. I know one of the reason I asked was because divestiture was one of the topics. We decided at that time that it was, it would be a one-time, an unfortunate, one-time gain and potentially long-term loss should those demographic numbers, should the population numbers, not really demographic, but population numbers start on an upward swing again. That was something that we kind of looked at holding it just as, because I kind of had a feeling that was part of what you were thinking about.
Yeah.
That was the thought at the time, is that, and I think at the time we were also kind of looking at speculation that this decline in population might have gone a little deeper than it did. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that.
I would agree. It wouldn't hurt to list it just for transparency for those that don't know what we own.
For me, it's not about, what we could do on it, but I think it's important to have it on there just so we know, and as you said, we are transparent. These are the assets we have. If needed, we have, access to this land. We can use it this way or that way or not use it at all.
It's really a good thought, just because if you don't know what you have, you're not thinking about it. If you know you have it, then it might give you the pause to say, well, we're thinking about this, maybe we could use that. So,
Could the board get a copy of the properties and some specs about those properties? And also that particular group that would be looking, just to have it in their back pocket if they want to look at it?
We can add that insight to the full committee, just to tell them if there's other properties in the district that must be on physical buildings, just so it's on their radar. And then it would probably be the physical condition group who would start looking at that more deeper if that's a charge.
We'll add an extra bullet point in.
Dan, sorry, just to clarify, we did do, or I should ask the ladies too, we have reflected on here the administration building, right, you said? And Transpo Center, or do we reflect transportation center?
What I wrote was consider the needs of district level facilities and support services.
Okay, so that's everything. Okay, thanks. Not that we're displacing Mr. Baird anytime. I'm just saying.
So we're good to go with the extra bullet point?
That's what I'm hearing better. We need to be sure because Thursday's the
We
day.
meet Thursday, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yes.
I'm in agreement.
Okay, I heard it or I saw shaking of heads.
Is it okay for us to launch this as a draft statement with the committee then on Thursday, just to give them the ground rules as we start the process? We can still call it draft if there's some fine tuning or formalization you can make.
Are we ready to say it's not a draft?
Well, you just have to add that land.
Yeah.
If we can get that out this today, Monday, we can get it out by Wednesday, then we're good.
I'll go home and I'll write a bullet point and ask this. Problem is, we can only do one other board member at a time, so I'll relay it to Mrs. Barker and we'll get it to Dr. Pearson to get it to you. How's that? And the rest of the board.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
you guys were the ones kind of in charge of that. Do you think we've wrapped it up with that? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your being here. I know
Thank you.
It was a long night and a long time sitting waiting for that discussion. So thank you very much for your time. I guess we are now, we're now at the end. So our next, we have the annual meeting. Okay, well, our next meeting is going to be November 16th, and potential items are going to be student learning outcomes and goals and the reopening plan update. I'm looking out there, making sure. All right, so I guess that concludes today's meeting at 8:05.
Thank you. Sorry about my tardiness again. I did text this. She drove it.
That's all right.
I did.